You come at us, we aren't rolling over. You know, sure, we're going to get hurt. There's no doubt. But they're going to get hurt just as much. When they start closing the plants, auto plants.
Says President Trump's threat of tariffs is really weighing heavily on the company. Already, the automaker cut its earnings forecast this year by $1.5 billion.
Thinking of buying an American car, especially a Ford? You might want to reconsider. May 17, 2025, marked a dark day in Ford's history. The company shocked the nation by announcing the shutdown of major assembly lines on U.S. soil. Two iconic plants in Chicago and Michigan are closing indefinitely, cutting nearly 9,000 jobs. The Midwest is reeling from a wave of layoffs. The reason? Ford expects a $1.5 billion loss this year, not due to war or China, but due to former President Donald Trump's 25% tariffs on imported cars and parts. Instead of bringing jobs back, the tariffs are forcing American factories to shut down. When questioned, Trump offered no sympathy. They should have brought production back a long time ago. Is America First turning into an empty slogan, leaving American workers behind? Trump's re-election campaign in 2024 centered on reviving U.S. industry. A key policy, slapping 25% tariffs on all imported auto parts and vehicles, including those from allies like Canada, Mexico, Japan, and South Korea. The goal? Cut dependence on China and protect U.S. jobs. The result? Ford now says it's bleeding billions. According to its Q1 2025 report, EV component costs, especially batteries, sensors, and chips, rose 18% to 32% after the tariffs took effect in February. Ford's cross-border supply chain, stretching from Canada to Mexico, is now disrupted. Roughly 40% of parts in a Michigan-assembled Ford come from abroad. The fallout is massive. Over 2,300 workers laid off in Chicago. Another 1,100 in Flat Rock, Michigan. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, auto sector layoffs jumped 12.5% year-over-year, the highest spike since COVID. Ford CEO Jim Farley, speaking to CNBC, didn't hold back. We support U.S. production, but we can't build EVs with U.S. materials that cost twice as much. These tariffs aren't creating jobs, they're killing them. Ford has now paused its next-gen EV project, the T3, originally set to launch this year. Reuters reports that per-unit costs have topped $50,000, 22% over target, forcing price hikes and hurting demand. Meanwhile, foreign automakers, especially in Europe and South Korea, are gaining ground in the U.S. with help from export subsidies and more stable domestic policies. Inside factories, the "Make America Great Again" slogan rings hollow. Production lines sit idle. Workers are left without jobs. Entire families lose their main income. Economists warn this approach is backfiring. The Peterson Institute estimates the tariffs will raise U.S. car prices by $5,700 on average, pushing buyers toward used vehicles or gray market imports. Ford's crisis isn't an isolated case, it's a warning. Trade wars and forced tariffs aren't rebuilding America. They're tearing it down. And it's everyday American workers paying the price. In just weeks after the tariffs were implemented in April 2025, the U.S. auto industry was hit hard. From price hikes and layoffs to delayed projects, Ford, GM, and Stellantis are all feeling the pain. Economic data paints a stark picture of the U.S. auto industry's current crisis. Ford has raised prices on 3 Mexico-made models, the Mustang Mach-E by $1,500 to $2,000, the Bronco Sport by $600 to $1,500, and the Maverick by around $700. These hikes apply to vehicles built after May 2, 2025, hitting dealerships by late June. Ford said it tried to absorb some tariff costs but couldn't avoid passing increases to customers due to surging production expenses. In response to China's 150% retaliatory tariffs on U.S. vehicle imports, Ford also suspended exports of the F-150 Raptor, Mustang, Bronco, and Lincoln Navigator to China to minimize losses in a fiercely competitive market. The company has also delayed its new EV launches to 2026 and paused work at its Blue Oval City plant in Kentucky. On top of that, It cut 350 jobs in its connected vehicle software unit to rein in costs amid shrinking revenues. Ford isn't alone. GM lowered its 2025 profit forecast by $4 to $5 billion, citing tariffs. Stellantis halted operations at multiple plants in Canada and Mexico and laid off 900 U.S. workers. Analysts at Goldman Sachs expect U.S. car sales to drop by nearly 1 million units in 2025, from 16 million to around 15 million, driven by higher prices discouraging buyers. The Trump administration's tariff push, aimed at shielding U.S. manufacturers, appears to be backfiring, raising costs, cutting jobs, and forcing companies to rethink strategies. Once a pillar of U.S. economic strength, the auto sector now risks a broader downturn without swift, pragmatic policy shifts. Many economists are asking, if this continues, which industry will be hit next? The fallout is hitting hardest in auto-heavy states like Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana. Layoffs are spreading across manufacturers and suppliers. Ford confirmed job cuts in the U.S. and Canada, especially in software divisions. Major supplier Lear Corporation also plans to cut 15,000 jobs globally in 2025, following previous reductions, as rising input costs and weak demand take their toll. To boost sales, Ford launched an Employee Pricing for Everyone program, April 3 to June 2, 2025, offering Ford and Lincoln vehicles at staff discount rates. Still, tariffs kept pushing prices up. According to Kelley Blue Book, the average new car price hit $48,699 in April, up 2.5% year over year, the biggest April jump since 2020, and twice the decade's monthly average. The damage ripples far beyond automakers. In auto-reliant communities, shrinking payrolls and production are dragging down local economies, increasing unemployment, and raising questions about the real effectiveness of current trade policies. Tariffs were intended to protect U.S. jobs. Instead, they're straining a cross-border auto supply chain that has evolved over decades. Ford, for instance, assembles engines in Windsor, Canada, builds car bodies in Hermosillo, Mexico, and completes vehicles in Dearborn, U.S. New tariffs added an estimated $4,911 in cost per U.S. assembled vehicle for Ford, triggering plant closures and delaying new investments, including the Blue Oval City project in Kentucky, now postponed until 2026. Other automakers are also scrambling. Toyota is exploring a shift of some RAV4 production from Canada and Japan to Kentucky, though this requires expensive retooling. Nissan has stopped taking U.S. orders for 2 Mexico-made Infiniti SUVs and ramped up Rogue production in Tennessee instead. According to the Center for Automotive Research, Ford, GM, and Stellantis are facing $41.7 billion in extra costs due to tariffs, threatening profits and global competitiveness. Ultimately, these costs hit consumers hardest, through higher car prices and fewer sales, putting the entire industry under mounting pressure. Automakers are under intense pressure, forced to restructure supply chains and rethink production strategies amid economic volatility. But this transformation takes time, cooperation, and government support. It can't happen overnight. The Trump administration's 25% tariff policy has backfired, turning American cars into luxury goods overseas. Ford was forced to halt exports of key models like the F-150 Raptor, Mustang, Bronco, and Lincoln Navigator to China, where tariffs have reached as high as 150%, wiping out one of its most profitable markets. China retaliated with an 84% tariff on U.S. goods, including vehicles, giving an edge to rivals from South Korea and Europe. In Europe, U.S. dealers face higher logistics and tariff costs, forcing them to cut back. Even at home, American cars are becoming more expensive than imports. In April 2025, U.S. car prices jumped 2.5%, the biggest spike since 2008. The effectiveness of the tariff policy is now in question. As Ford announced multiple U.S. factory closures, Trump's reaction was blunt: they should have brought production back a long time ago. His statement shocked economic advisors and auto executives, raising doubts about future cooperation. Markets reacted immediately. Shares of Ford, GM, and Stellantis dropped. Ford suspended its 2025 financial forecast, citing $1.5 billion in projected losses from tariffs and supply chain disruptions. Still, Trump sticks to the America First message, insisting U.S. industry will bounce back. But experts warn the tariffs are doing lasting damage, hurting competitiveness, consumers, and jobs. Amid rising backlash, Trump recently delayed new tariffs on China for 90 days to allow for negotiations. Each of his statements ripples through global markets. What started as a promise to rebuild America now risks triggering a self-made crisis. The U.S. auto industry is showing the cracks, factories closing, workers laid off, and car ownership slipping out of reach for many. No automaker, not even Ford, can bring supply chains back to the U.S. overnight. That takes a long-term plan and real policy, not slogans. When plants go dark and people lose their jobs, political catchphrases lose their meaning. So the question remains, is Ford just the beginning, or the first sign of a deeper collapse in the American heartland? This was just the beginning. Hit that subscribe button and buckle up. Digital Garage has so much more in store.